welcome to the Digital Labels and Packaging podcast with me, Mihad Adej, your host for today. Joining me is Kat Hay from the Food and Drink Federation. Hello, Kat. How are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you? You're right.
Yes, I'm good. I'm well. Now it is we're recording this on the 1st of April, but you're not allowed to prank me. No jokes. No, because when it goes out, it'll be far beyond the threshold for that sort of thing. So, keep it straight today. But we're gonna talk about yourself and the federation and what you do, the work there, and sort of what your top priorities are at the moment. So, just very quickly, tell us about the Food and Drink Federation. What its aims are and your role there.
Great. Well, the risk of being old news by the time this is broadcast. So essentially our members, we're a trade association for food and drink manufacturers. So our members are the ones who are making your Easter eggs that you'll hopefully all be enjoying. We represent companies in the UK who are making all the products you find in your kitchen, from confectionery and sweeties and crisps to ready meals, soft drinks, yeah, anything you can think of in your supermarket aisle that goes in your basket for your groceries. That's who our members are. Some of the biggest companies in the world, household names and brands like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, some small family businesses, and indeed some own label manufacturers that are making products for the supermarkets.
So it's
So
quite a big range then,
huge.
of different size companies and their concerns, and they're going to have many different sort of fires, irons in the fire, so to speak, when it comes to what's important to them.
Definitely, and we cover a lot of things that will be of interest to your members, to your listeners. Some maybe less so, but covering a range of issues around health, around business growth, around innovation, automation and technology, around skills for the industry. But probably of most interest is the work that I do around packaging and sustainability, which has just been huge for our members over the last few years.
Okay, excellent. But yeah, the audience here is more sort of concerned about the printing element of that. And on that note, do you have a favorite type of print, or a favorite type of packaging?
Was interesting this. I'm going to go a little left field on this. I was thinking about this
Yeah.
earlier. Um, Printing's everywhere. It's almost so universal that it's hiding in plain sight.
Yes.
It's one of these things that you don't think about just because it's always there. One of the things I really like is around printing of the tote bags that have become, again, universal. Every tourist shop in London has
Yes.
got a tote bag.
Yeah.
And as someone who used to collect fridge magnets on my travels, and my fridge has got full, I was thinking about other ways that you can procure a reasonably priced and fun souvenir.
Yeah.
Tote bags, those little cotton tote bags that have anything you want printed on them. We've all seen the corporate ones, but you can also get some
Yeah.
fabulous ones from places around the world. They cost a couple of pounds or equivalent in local currency. And what I do with those is chop the handles off the totes and frame them. So you end up with a really cool canvas. So I would say get your glue gun out for a few euros or a few pounds. You
That
can
is,
get a cool
yeah.
tote and get it up on your wall. So I've had some compliments on those in the past, being like, oh, that's nice art. And I'm thinking, yeah, it cost me €3 from a little tacky tourist stand.
Yeah, that's a nice way of doing it. That is, yeah, nice little souvenir. I like that. Yeah, I wonder if you could, well, you could stuff it, maybe make a cushion out of it.
That is also an option. Yeah. As I say, I'm quite a crafty person, so I'm always up for that. Anything that involves a glue gun or a pair of scissors, then I'm up for that.
Excellent, excellent. How many do you think you have?
I think going up my stairs in my house, I've got five or six. The one I get most compliments about randomly is the one I got in Cyprus, which has a very psychedelic cat on it.
Okay,
Um,
right.
Slightly
Yeah.
mad looking cat. But then also, yeah, I've got sort of slightly more sort of tasteful black and white ones with some sort of like cityscapes from
Okay,
different cities, Berlin and Dublin and others. So it's cool.
lovely. Like I say, print is just everywhere. It really is.
Oh,
So, I want to talk to you about EPR and pEPR Pro,
yeah.
as that being one of the Food and Drink Federation's sort of main priorities at the moment. Um, how is this affecting your members, and do you want to just talk about sort of the mission here for Pro Packaging?
Yeah, absolutely. So EPR, I would say, obviously I'm biased, but is become one of the biggest issues for our members in the last couple of years. And that's really because of the size of the bill. So we're talking in total a 1.5 billion cost to all producers of packaging. So that's not just my members in food and drink, but it's anyone placing
Right. Yes.
packaging in the UK market. That's a sizable bill. It's a huge transfer, seeing costs of collection and disposal and recycling of packaging moving from the local authorities and public sector money to producers. And there's been a huge range of views on whether that's a good thing to do or not. Certainly, us and our members have got a view that these schemes have operated really successfully around the globe. I think fair to say the UK is a little bit behind the curve, and it's great that we're now finally catching up with that. But essentially, when you're taking responsibility for that, that runs right through the supply chain. Again, back to your listeners around scoping all the packaging and all the elements that go into packaging, from the materials used into inks and printing as well, and how easy that is, not just to recycle in principle, but also is it set up to be captured and reprocessed and recycled within the UK recycling system. So big change, big cost, and certainly driving a lot of innovation and different thinking within our membership. We conducted some research last year when we were looking into what the impact of the EPR scheme has been. And I think it's really important that those of us who are focused very much in on the sustainability elements of packaging don't drink too much Kool-Aid, and that we understand that there's so many other decisions that go into deciding what materials and how people's packaging is designed and printed. And I think that's been really important for me in my role to reflect back to, again, the policymakers in government who are very focused on that very specific area of EPR, to understand that there are other push and pull factors at play, from the look of the product, the consumers, how easy it is to understand. And then for our products in food and drink manufacturing, it's also really important to understand that there are all sorts of other regulations relating to packaging and printing that they have to adhere to, around food contact material regulations, and other health requirements. That means certain specific nutrition, allergen information has to go on labels. So there's a ton of things that I like to call a kind of fight for the packaging and label that are going on beyond EPR. So that's kind of where we are in a nutshell. FDF and others have been beavering away in the background. We've been looking at examples of other international examples of best practice, and very much focusing in on how the producers can be involved in driving that change. In schemes around the world, we have what's called producer responsibility organisations. They are set up and run by producers to make sure that we drive up the recycling rates. And again, we look at where best practice is, and what materials are accessible and acceptable in recycling schemes around the world. And delighted, actually, on day of recording today, it is April Fool's Day, but it is not an April Fool, that the UK Packaging Pro has been appointed as the producer responsibility organisation for the UK scheme. And a number of my members have been involved in that, and will be taking that forward. So it's a great opportunity for those producing packaging to really get a hold of that responsibility, not just pay the bill for that disposal, but also start scoping and looking at efficiencies throughout the system, and working together on innovation and design, and looking at the whole life of that packaging. So it's an exciting and busy time.
Yes, yeah, very busy for you guys at the moment. So will then UK Packaging Pro, will that be offering resources then to everyone in the sort of packaging supply chain, and offering advice and help, moving forward?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. And as I say, it's very early days. We have ambitions, and I think, a shopping list from producers and from others in the supply chain, as long as my arm, about all the exciting things we can do in the future. But it's going to be an iterative process. Yes, absolutely. We want to make sure there's huge collaboration going on, not just between the producers and designers, but also with other parts of the supply chain, to make sure that the whole packaging value chain works. And again, that will be very, very appropriate to your listeners, because labels are a huge part of looking at how recyclable a piece of packaging is. There's a very, very complex model called the recycling assessment methodology that sits in the EPR regs. And please don't ask me on this call to, unless your listeners are listening in for insomnia cures, to explain how this all works in the background. But essentially, it's a traffic light system which categorizes packaging into red, amber, and green, and how recyclable that is within the UK system, and there are costs associated with that. And the more difficult to recycle packaging will be more expensive for producers to pay a fee on. Green will incentivize and be cheaper. But that is important because within the recycling assessment methodology, there are requirements around how much surface area a label takes up, or how much of the packaging a sleeve or an outer takes up. And that's different whether it's pots, tubs, and trays or other products. There are provisions in there, from my understanding, about sort of problematic elements of labelling, so things that are non-removable adhesives, for instance, if you have multi-material labels or a very, very heavy ink coverage. So there are all sorts of things that will be coming that those of you, your listeners who are producing labels and doing the printing, will find the conversations changing over time with producers about what they want. And part of that will be driven by EPR fees, because there will be a cost associated with that.
Right, okay. I think one of the sort of biggest problems that label printers often find is that there's lots of very good materials out there, but sometimes they're just not available unless you're buying in massive quantities, like some of the bigger sort of multi-corporations can. Is the group in conversation with sort of material suppliers as well, and how that could potentially be eased a little bit?
Very much so. I think that's really, really important. And there's a question for us, let's be honest, supply chains operate on a global basis, but there's also a huge desire around that kind of circular economy ambition. What materials are available that are appropriate to use in this country that fit with our recycling system, that we can actually be looking at producing in the UK, working with the supply chain to make sure they can fit within the recycling system in the UK as well. But I think your point around sort of impact on SMEs and that cost pressure and availability is something that we do recognise more universally in packaging as well, around procuring. I've seen it certainly in my role around recycled content of packaging. So there's a plastic packaging tax currently in the UK, around incentivising use of recycled plastic in products, packaging. But the challenge is it's not available. So large companies buy up all the supply and there's not enough left for small companies. So there's a wider question there about supply chain fairness and making sure that we have access to the right materials at the right price to make sure that people can get their hands on what they need at an acceptable price and something that works for consumers as well. That is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else I think we wanted to talk about today was EU PPWR. Just how does that fit into what we've just been speaking about earlier?
Yeah, very much, again, so relevant just now. And the member research that I talked about earlier, we did back in summer, we touched lightly on PPWR, but actually it came out as a top issue of concern for our members, because what they do in terms of their packaging strategies is they're trying to find the best fit that lays across several different countries within the EU and beyond. And so the UK is one market, and they're trying to think about their long-term packaging strategy. It's quite difficult for them to say, well, we're producing a small quantity of product for the UK market, but then we're covering a much broader EU market. I'm really keen to make sure that we can have as few different packaging formats for one product as possible, because obviously, again, that adds costs and complexity to the supply chain. There's a particular issue, of course, in Northern Ireland because of the Windsor framework, where the PPWR regulations, part of them apply, some parts don't.
Okay.
And there's still a little bit of ambiguity as to which parts of the PPWR regulations will apply in Northern Ireland and which won't. And again, which parts of the UK packaging EPR regulations will apply in Northern Ireland and which won't. There's also a question from my side of things when we look at policy and with government about dynamic alignment. So what elements within PPWR does the UK and indeed the four nations of the UK, their governments have around alignment with different impacts? And what does that mean again for the onward journey of those products? Because the PPWR regulations are being designed with a sort of harmonised EU recycling system, and the UK and the EPR regulations in the UK and our recycling system doesn't match up and plug into that simply. So again, when we think about coming back to the labelling issue, there's a question mark around the harmonisation of those recycling labels that are coming out through PPWR. I was at Packaging Innovations this year, and I listened to a really, really good presentation about that. And I was personally struck by how many different kinds of recycling label there might be on different products within the EU. The different colours that will require, and again, different inks and printing for those labels. How that actually looks and translates to on pack and the size and the detail in those labels. My personal view is that's going to make it actually really complicated for consumers, not simpler. So the more granular you make it, you know, the more challenging. So there's a question mark there for the government, for our members and organisations like ourselves and the PRO, as how much do we want to align with that and at what cost? And will it lead to increased recycling rates in the UK by simply harmonising? I think there's a big question mark in there. I think I've got kind of certainly a view about the simpler you can make it for the end consumer, the better for the whole supply chain, right back to, again, design, print, packaging manufacturers, really, really important. But I think as well, the PPWR does create perhaps a bit of a snowball effect in some really positive areas. They've got some legally binding targets on reuse. So there's a feeling amongst our members that whilst reuse is an interesting concept, you need a big step change and you need everyone to move at the same time to make sure then all the back systems around reuse are in place. So perhaps that creates that innovation, that market and that size and scale required to make that change, and it makes it easier for people to all get on board together. And then, of course, for your listeners around labels and inks, so there'll be substance rules relating to PPWR that they will, again, be looking at. And if there's something more consistent that can make that easier for them, then that's a good thing too.
So no one really, enjoys regulation in terms of having to deal with it day to day. How have your members received sort of the changes going through, and are they prepared for it? Can they see it's for the common good generally, and they willing to go along with it?
I think what I've experienced at the FDF, and this kind of transcends not just specifics on the PPWR and EPR, but more generally, is you tend to find that policymakers put out good intentions and policy directions, by and large, tend to move in a similar direction to ambitions around the manufacturers that we represent. So let's be honest, everybody wants to be more environmentally sustainable. Everybody wants packaging to be more recyclable to make it easier for the end consumer. Nobody wants to see packaging littered or leaking out the environment. We don't want to see valuable materials shipped off or burnt. There's lots of things where we're all moving in the same direction. The issue comes with the how and the sequencing, particularly of how those changes happen. So there's been a huge amount of policy and legislative change in this area coming to producers in the last few years, and how it's been sequenced also sometimes feels quite back to front. So there are some specific examples where you think, yeah, we've gone ahead with EPR, but we haven't then decided what recycling labels are going to be mandated or otherwise in the UK. That decision's been pushed down the road. For this all to work, you've then got to factor in the fact that who's making the final choice about the right bin that goes in is the consumer. So have we put the right steps in place to make it easier for the consumer? Are we trying to do too much too soon in terms of the EPR and how quickly changes are expected to be made? And I think from the producer side who are paying the bills is we're aware that the challenges some of the local authorities who are the key collection agents on that are facing, like they have got massive financial challenges. They've also, a lot of them are tied into very, very long contracts in terms of some of their collection onward sorting. I looked at, there was a piece out not directly related to packaging, but around food waste. And some of the food waste collection contracts that local authorities have got run out to 2040.
Okay.
Um, Now, the local authorities, there's regulation coming relating to collection of flexible plastics next year. And that's really important for our members because that flexible plastic material is so valuable.
Yeah.
Um, but I can see the same thing happening. I think there'll be huge long contracts with perhaps energy from waste plants that run on for another 20 years that mean we can't then get that material back and recycle it and reprocess it. So that's nobody's fault. It's just the way things are in the UK.
Yeah.
So these are challenges we've got to work together to overcome. It's like, how is that going to work and how are things sequenced? And does regulation come in too quickly that then penalizes in the industrial supply chain with factors that are completely outside of their control? So that's a big challenge.
Yeah. Like you're completely right about the, how local authorities are all running independently from each other. And so, there's no cohesion nationwide across what's, the end target for recycling within those constituencies.
Yeah, and I just quickly add to that. I mean, one of the most exciting things about setting up the PRO is that there is a home for local authorities there as well. There's been a huge amount of, with especially within the kind of the trade press of mudslinging between producers and local authorities, and I'm just going to say that openly. I think at the time because people were trying to kick open doors and get things done in terms of policy and regulation. But that time's passed, and we really want to get in very quickly
Mhm.
to make sure that we are working with the local authorities. They are the key collection agents in all of this.
Yeah.
If local authorities don't go out and empty the bins from consumers, then the system doesn't work in practice. So I'm really, really keen that the local authorities and the producers work together to come up with a system that works for the UK. That's really, really fundamental, and I see them absolutely as partners in this.
Too right. Too right. We also talked about ease for the user and consumer, and with a plethora of different labels that might need to go onto a label. I wondered if you had any thoughts about the, commonality of GS1 becoming more popular, 2D barcodes, and the potential that that's got to store a lot more information about the product, about the packaging online, so it doesn't have to all fit onto the label.
Um, always say I'm not a technical expert, but yeah, again, from a personal point of view, I think it's a great opportunity, as you say, to really simplify the labels and allow consumers to find the information that they want. And it does become, as you correctly say, a catch-all. You could look up your health information, nutrition, allergens, recycling. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that then that links to your local recycling based on your geolocation. So you could just, if you scan it, you say, oh, actually, I know I'm in Glasgow. I'll be able to recycle this in this bin, these kind of things. That's great. That is really, really transformational. And to my view makes it much more accessible. My dad's partially sighted and really struggles to read a lot of the information that has to by law be on pack in very, very small writing. So if he can look
Yeah.
at that on a smart device and see that much bigger, it becomes more accessible. I think that's a great opportunity. And I think again, there's sort of traceability opportunities throughout the packaging value chain as well to trace that piece of packaging as it moves through the system and to help the recycling and reprocessing journey. So yeah, I think it's great. It's great to see it coming. The other thing that I found out about over the last couple of years is around Navilens and that multicolored code that are on some of the packs that again you don't need to be aware to scan that code close up, but again if you're partially sighted you can walk along a shelf, scan that from afar, again, get the information on your smartphone. These
Yeah.
things become really transformational. So I think innovation in the digital label space it's really exciting. Again, there's a sort of video versus Betamax, if that's not too old a reference. Like which of these various different digital technologies are going to be the one? And I
Yeah.
think there probably will have to be a one at some
Mhm.
point, as there have been with barcodes, like what is that thing? Um, but yeah, it's going to be really, really an exciting opportunity, certainly for our members to be able to give the consumer the information that they want and to help them find that information more accessible in the future. So I guess the sooner the better on that.
Yeah. Okay, shall we just finish up with one last question? And I guess I'd like to know, Kat, what you would like to see happen in perhaps the next 6 months, 12 months, for Pack Pro and the Food and Drink Federation exactly in your in your initiatives here at the moment?
Maybe it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but genuinely that partnership working. So it does take a value chain, right? You know, they talk about it takes a village to do things, but the same, it takes a community, a supply chain to actually make these changes happen. No one part of the packaging value chain and the PRO is not going to do this alone. So it's genuinely about having as many conversations with as many different parts of the supply chain. The UK Packaging Pro's got lots of learning to be done, lots of connections to build, and that's very much an open door. I temper that slightly with expectation management. That giant shopping list that we talked about is we can't do everything in 6 or 12 months, but even though we may have ambition to do so, so that's really important. But I think the other big thing is around that kind of you need the good policy to work, you need the supply chain, but you also need the citizens, and that is a huge thing for me. I was at a roundtable in Scotland where they were talking about changes to the household recycling charter in Scotland, and I was sat at a table of waste managers, and I learned so much from them. It was a great event, and just hearing from the reality on the ground of people whose day job's different from yourselves. And I was talking about how digital labels and AI and all these exciting innovations within the sector are coming and what that might mean for waste managers. And I had a guy sitting next to me and he said, you see, the thing is, that's all well and good. He said, but from my side of things, my local authority area, he said, I'd really like to stop the residents just chucking their rubbish out their windows. And I sort of laughed and he said, no, I'm deadly serious. He said, that's the lowest common denominator we're dealing with. So you're talking about getting people to do the right thing. He said, my right thing is please stop chucking sofas and black bag rubbish out your window into your common areas. So I think it's not to lose sight of that. That there's a lot of issues there still to be done as well, and behaviour change is going to be a key part, but sometimes the most difficult part of that to do as well. So behaviour change experts and people working directly with citizens is going to be so fundamental to that as well. But it's such an exciting time.
I guess you said it earlier. The end goal has to be recycling rates increase. And that's really the only barometer we can go by, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? But it's always as well, it's just like not at any cost. So it has to be done in a way that doesn't drive up food prices from my member side of things, that consumers can still afford to buy the products. That means that everyone in the supply chain still gets paid a fair and decent price for the work that they do to make that product hit the shelves and to get it back as well. So yes, absolutely. North Star is an increase in recycling rates, a significant increase in recycling rates, but also backed up by a way that's done in an efficient and effective and cost-controlled way.
Excellent. Well, Kat, thank you very much for your time today. Shedding some
Pleasure.
light on a complicated area. But I think, it's been a big help. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.